So I'm here with Santi Jaramillo, and Santi is someone who I met. Santi, I'm so happy that I think I got the pronunciation pretty close there.
Nailed
Yeah.
it.
So Santi is someone that I met 4 or 5 years ago, and I went on a vision quest, and he was one of the other participants. And I think everyone in that vision quest, there was 9 of us, and we had 2 guides. And I know those things for a fact because it was such an impactful moment. And so, Santi, I'm so glad to have you here, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you, Jeff. So great to be with you. Yeah.
So when we met back in the fall of 2019, you were the CEO of a startup. It was just, it seems like it's always crazy times in the startup world.
Mhm.
And can you just talk a little bit about like your background? Because I know that wasn't your first startup there.
Yeah. Happy to share it. So I've always been an entrepreneur. I was born in Cali, Colombia, and sold avocados to my parents' friends and water in my Colombian neighborhood. And that was how I got my start. But then back in college, I got involved in technology in a exact target in a SaaS startup in Indianapolis, and really fell in love with the idea of a creating an amazing place for people to work and also having a global scale, which you could do with a software product. And so we began that journey. The first startup was called Blue Bridge, and it was bringing mobile apps to the masses, white labeled mobile apps. And so it became the largest tourism app platform in the world. So we powered the apps for Visit Colorado, Visit Indianapolis, Visit South Africa, these are iOS and Android apps. It was like a WordPress for tourism mobile apps. And then we also had another division for powering church apps for the big mega churches. And a few other kind of segments. And so that was all about mobile. And that was my first time being a CEO. I was in my 20s. I made so many mistakes and learned so much, but, figured out how to manage people. I never had a manager before. So I had to figure out how to manage people and then how to manage managers and ultimately really how to lead and inspire and cast vision. So that was the first one. We sold that startup to 2 different companies. One of them was a publicly traded company in New Zealand, and the other one was a private equity based business in Arizona. And then it was really because we realized that we weren't really passionate about tourism apps or church apps. It was just like a good business where we could create an amazing place for people to work. So the next thing we wanted to try to do, my business partner Adam and I, he was also in the Vision Quest, was how do we actually not only create an amazing place to work and a great business with global scale, but also do it in an area that we're passionate about, that we actually really care about the space and the problem. And that was organizational culture and leadership. And so for us, at that time I really enjoyed getting data about kind of what was going on. And so it was all about how do we measure organizational culture, take this kind of fuzzy thing and quantify it and help leaders know how great is their culture, do employees really feel about it, not how you think they feel about it, but how they actually think. And so how do you create a safe place for employees to give leadership feedback and have that feedback kind of flow for the whole organization? So that was the second one, and that's the one that I was leading at the time. And we were growing like crazy and serving brands like Purdue University and global brands as well, helping them a better employee engagement survey. Not only that, but then we've ended up finding out that 70% of employee engagement isn't about employee engagement. It's actually about great management and leadership. So it ultimately dovetailed into actually, it's really not about culture and not about employee engagement. Yes, it's about that, but the leading indicator, the leading thing to really focus on is the quality of managers and the quality of leaders in the organization. And so we hired a whole staff of manager coaches to do data-driven coaching on the survey results. And that ended up being the key to the business. Is you could do an employee survey all sorts of ways, but to get coaching based on how your team actually experiences you and your leadership and management style was game changing. And so that was that startup, and that was an amazing ride. And I got to co-author a book called Agile Engagement with the head of HR from Exact Target that I mentioned before, and went on a speaking tour and got to grow that business to a pretty sizable place. And it was also a really hard and intense and at times quite stressful journey. And that was part of, going on the vision quest, was getting some clarity around there's so many things that are going well and I'm achieving some of my like loftiest professional goals beyond my wildest dreams as from a coming from Colombia at 10 years old. But I didn't, there was parts of my life that didn't feel fulfilled and full of meaning and happiness and joy. And that was really a strange experience to kind of accomplish what I thought would make me feel a certain way and then realize that it didn't make me feel a certain way. It was actually kind of the opposite. And then, so what do you do when you medaled in the Olympics and that was what you've been aspiring to your whole life, and yet you're there and you're like, I'm not sure I'm happy. Like, what do you do with that? And that was the space of exploration that I walked into that vision quest with and got to share, with you and a few others in the Montana wilderness.
No, it was a crazy time in the Montana wilderness when we went up there, and it was the storm of the century.
In like October, right? I mean, it was like 3 feet of snow or something in October. I was like, I did not sign up for snow camping. I am warm-blooded. What am I doing here? Yeah.
Oh, so yeah, maybe we could tell some Vision Quest stories in a little bit, because it was a crazy time. So now it's interesting because when we met and just, I guess, a little bit about the Vision Quest is you spend a lot of time together and you get to know each other very, very well. And it feels like, I think it was 9 days, we felt like I created a decade of friendship with you and the others that were there. And we all stay in touch to this day. There's monthly calls that we have, and not all of us make them every time. In fact, most of us don't, because we're all really busy, but still we stay in touch to this day. It was amazing. But one of the things that struck me about you, Santi, was like, you're a CEO, you have this funded startup. It was crazy busy times, and you have a lot of this charging forward about you, just moving, but also you had this great big heart that did show up in how you cared so much about people and about both the people on your team, but also what your company was doing was helping people have better lives within work. Yeah. So can you just talk a little bit maybe about culture and what is good culture within a team, and what does that look like, and how do you get that, and how do you lose it, and anything else you want to talk about with regards to culture?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, part of what I'm passionate about that is I never got to meet my grandfather. He died really early. I think my dad was like 13 years old, and he died a lot of it from like work stress. Basically, just had a miserable job, and so. For me, if we're miserable at work, it affects us deeply. It affects our health. It affects our relationships. It affects so much. And work can be also the opposite. It can be like, not only can it be like a drain of life force and energy, in a traumatizing place to be, but it can also be an incredible place for growing and achieving our potential and growing as humans and coming into contact with our limitations and our limiting beliefs. And so work is just this huge leverage of it can be a really rich environment for growth, or it can be really destructive. And so caring deeply for that, and also, having payroll and needing to make payroll and and all of that. And so, Reboot talks about a leader has a strong back and an open heart. And that's the dichotomy of needing to care about fiscal responsibility and hold people accountable to their commitments of their work, right? That's the strong back, being willing to part ways with a team member who may be getting the job done, but is having a poor impact on their team members' mental health or something like that. And so it's really impactful and it's very polarizing in that way. It can be a beautiful thing and not. And culture is about balancing those two things. How do we care for the mission of the organization? How do we create a place that ultimately fulfills and realizes the mission of the organization, and also cares for the people at the same time? And there are times when those two guiding principles are in conflict, and that is the incredible, heartbreaking reality of leadership. Is what do you do when 50% of your customers in COVID tell you they're not going to pay you anymore, and if you don't lower costs, you go out of business in 3 months, right? And you're faced with these choices where how do I sustain the mission and also care for people during a global pandemic? And so that's what a great culture accomplishes: is it attracts, retains, and motivates the right people to pursue the mission with their full heart, mind, and soul, where they can be fully them, where they can show up with more of themselves, not just their worker part, but their heart and mind, and their passion, their joy, and their vulnerability to the organization. And also, how do you protect the mission and the sustainability of what the business needs to do so that it can live to fight another day and continue fulfilling that mission that is good for the world, in a year from now. And so, culture isn't the core values on the painted on the wall, and it's not what's on the slide deck during onboarding. Culture is formed by the actions of leaders. It's who gets hired, who gets promoted, and who gets fired. Ultimately, you can talk about core values all day long, but if what people are experiencing is a different reality, culture is really the summation of the environment that's created by leadership's choices around people. And so that is one of the aspects of culture that come to mind. And then also on the culture side, it gets harder and harder the larger that you grow and the more of a victim of your success you are. Because in the beginning, we're one or two people, and where culture happens by default. Just we are just in a room and we're acting in certain ways. All of a sudden you go virtual and you have managers and teams, and you get more and more disconnected from the people kind of doing the work. And what we saw is that the more layers of management, the leadership was removed from kind of where the work was happening with the customer out on the field, or what have you, the greater the difference was between their perception of how their culture was and what the reality was. And so that's the gap that we hoped to narrow for leaders is actually is getting more accurate empathy, meaning what is the actual culture that's there, not the one that we hope there is or that we perceive there is, but what's really kind of there. And so, yeah, that's the role of management and culture, is how do we balance the means, the business and the people. And those are the two kind of guiding North Star that pull us forward. And I don't think there's a difference between leadership growth and human development. I think it's like one and the same. And so that's why I'm so passionate about this work, is I got into being coached as a leader because I just wanted to be better at my job and grow the business faster. But what I got out of it was like deep self-awareness about my blind spots and more choice about how I react in certain situations, and better listening skills and asking better questions. And those are life skills that my wife was like, I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it because you're like a better husband now. And it's like, I wasn't necessarily at that time reading a book about, marriage or how to be a better partner. I was working on my leadership, and ultimately I think it's very aligned, I think, our path. So it's a beautiful journey, and it's also a hard one.
Yeah. Challenging one.
Yeah.
You said so much there that was so rich. I don't even know what question I want to ask, which of the questions I want to ask next, because I do think, leadership and growing a team if you're not becoming a better person, if you're not becoming a better leader. I know, Santi, when we met, I think my team was probably around 22, 23, 24. We're at over 40 now. So we grew pretty quickly through COVID. And yeah, there was hard decisions along the way. What you just said there about, culture, one of the things I heard is culture is very much the decisions that leadership makes in terms of who you attract, who you hire, who you retain. And I think, who you're willing to entertain on your team, who you're willing to, you've got that person who's like a star performer, but they're a complete ass to people. It's like, are you going to tolerate that? And if you're going to tolerate that, then you're showing your people you're going to tolerate it. And
it's so true. And that's where culture is created. And you can even take the opposite scenario, which is someone's just a really wonderful, warm, kind human, but they're just not aligned with what the job responsibilities and the results that are needed. And so, and they're letting their team down. And the top performers who are culturally aligned are seeing leadership tolerate this lack of performance. And so those are right. What we want is somebody who's aligned with the culture and adding value to the humans around them and building culture, and also taking care of their job responsibilities. And so what happens when one of those is off? And that's a real test of leadership that requires clarity of expectations and open and honest communication, and ultimately decisions that are can be emotionally difficult at the time, but if done well, can actually welcome a new chapter for all involved, and give everyone a chance to thrive.
Right. Right. That's one of the perspectives I got is like, okay, Jeff, get over yourself. If like you have to part ways with someone, get it. It's not like you're the greatest employer, the greatest boss, the greatest leader ever in the world. There's probably a better fit for them somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so, just get over yourself.
Yeah.
It's like, so Santi, I wanted to bring this story in because it speaks so much, I think, to who you are. Can you just talk a little bit about Colombia and moving to the States from Colombia and what?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Yeah, Colombia's a beautiful place. It is incredible people, and I visit regularly now. It is so much safer than it used to be, but in the 90s, it was one of the most dangerous places in the world. And I had just watched Swiss Family Robinson. So this is the story of pretty much the pivotal event of why my parents left their business and their friends and their family and their language and their culture, their food, their everything as 40-something-year-olds to give my brother and I a better life. It was a huge sacrifice they made, that ultimately, has given me a lot of the life opportunities and the potential that I've been able to realize. And so I watched Swiss Family Robinson and got obsessed with building my own treehouse. My dad is a great dad and obliged. And we were building this treehouse. The palm fronds that we were going to put as a roof were getting dry. And so I was like, Dad, can we please skip church and finish building the treehouse? And so he goes like, I'm not going to make that decision. You got to go ask Mom. Mom was in a great mood, was very supportive of this treehouse. So we keep building it. An hour later, we're building the treehouse and we hear some gunshots. We were really close by. I didn't know the difference between a car backfiring. I think I was 9 years old at the time. And my dad looks over and he was like, oh, this is not a good situation. Now, there was two camouflage kind of military looking trucks sitting outside the church, and people were being herded in by these men in sort of camo. They looked like the army, but they were shooting their machine guns or whatever up in the air. So he says, like, that's not the army. They can't be doing that. That's like unsafe. So he called the police and told them something's going on with the church. They didn't believe him just because it was so ridiculous. But they came into the city called Cali, Colombia, where I was from, the 2-3 million people. And this militia group that was came into the church, told them the army there was a bomb in the building, and evacuated over 120 men, women, and children that day. Most of they were sort of shipped into the outskirts of the city, and then started to walk into the jungle, basically, because there were mountains nearby. The children were let go that day, but over 100 adults were held for ransom. So they had to sell cars and houses to get their loved ones back. And many of them were gone for over a year. And so kids didn't know if their parents were alive for a while. It was a really, really tough situation. And of course, we were on the membership registry, so we thought they were like looking for us. And so it was really a time of uncertainty as a 9-year-old. Your parents are freaking out, and it's a scary time. And so my parents, made this huge sacrifice and took about a year to line up all the, immigration paperwork and get the work visa. And finally, we landed the summer of 2000 to the States in Fort Lauderdale, where we had an uncle, and shared a, 2-3-bedroom apartment with two families for each. But it was really hard to leave everything and adapt to a new place, and everything was so different. And it also really shaped me in really positive ways in terms of adaptability. Like, many times we don't control what's happening externally. Like, most of the important things in life we're not full in control of, at least our health, our loved ones. And we can only control how we react to these situations and how we adapt and accept into reality, and then adapt and choose to thrive where we're in our current situation. And so, yeah, it really shaped me, and it was a wild time, and so lucky and fortunate to have landed here, for sure. Very fortunate about that.
And landed in the States and not having any English at the time. Is that right?
I had some English from schooling, kind of like you'd have with, a few years of Spanish, in elementary school. So I had some vocab, but, I remember though walking into the first week of 5th grade, and I was like, the teacher assigned the homework, and I was like, I know there's homework, but I have no idea what it is. And it's just like, oh boy, like, just the speed of conversation is very different than what you learn in the classroom. So there's a a lot. Luckily at fifth grade, 10 years old, you're still pretty, neuroplasticity is still there. And so I was able to pretty quickly learn. And but I lost a lot of my like Colombianness in along the way, right? Because I really wanted to succeed here and I really wanted to master the language and to fit in and to assimilate. And I did, and it helped me a lot. And also, there's a question of what did I lose along the way? And I go back to Colombia and I'm like, oh, I don't feel super Colombian. And sometimes I'm here and I'm like, I don't sometimes feel super American, right? And so it's this kind of third culture kid phenomenon that's called, where you're sort of don't really fully fit in with either, but you're this kind of combo of the two. Yeah.
So you're in Colombia, you're selling avocados to your parents' friends, and so you're driven out of the womb. You've got that,
Yeah.
and then
I just see opportunity. Yeah. I don't know why. It just flows out of me. I just see opportunity. I'm like, I've got something you want, and like this will help you. And it's yeah, like that seeing the world as it could be and having ideas. It's almost like my in a way of my art. It's seeing like an open canvas, and creating a company is a beautiful thing when you think about there's nothing there before, and then you have an idea on a piece of napkin, and then you tell somebody, and they're like, I'll join you, I'll leave my full-time job with benefits to go, and this thing becomes something, and then you get to shape it, you get to give it core values, and you get to have a personality, and you get to choose who you work with, and then it becomes bigger than you in a way, right? Like these businesses go on without us. And so we're not only creating art that's static in a canvas, but we're creating art that's like a living, breathing kind of organism with a personality that's a collective of a bunch of people. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And how I think about it at my best, I'm creating art in my entrepreneurial creativity, if you will.
That's 100% the way I view it. I talk about, like, when I step in front of a room, like I step on stage, or in like one of our masterminds, I step in front of that, and I've got like this canvas. I literally use these words. I've got this canvas of 2 or 3 days, and I'm going to create, I'm going to try to bend reality here and create this experience where we become something greater than who we are, so that we can then carry it forward. So I definitely, I say that all the time to, like,
it's beautifully said.
Yeah, it's just, this is my art. I've always done all kinds of art in my life, but this is the art that I'm best at. And I think part of your art is also, I've seen this, I've experienced it personally, is your ability to reflect back, your ability to coach, and just be present with someone and say, this is what I heard you say, how does this sound? And I know you've started a coaching practice, but before we get there, I'd like to back into that and like how you got there, because that ties into the vision quest. And maybe before we even get there, we can talk, because I'm sure 95% of the people watching this are going to be like, what is this vision quest thing? and so, maybe you can define it, and I'll give my shot at defining it and what it is and how we ended up there out in the wilderness of Montana.
Yeah. So for me, I was making a transition. Looking back on it, I'm not sure if I had the words then. Actually, I think I did have the words then. I was reading an old journal from the time, and it was kind of a shift for me of surviving, and from surviving to thriving. I think those are two different orientations. When you're surviving, you're just barely trying to make it, and there's a bit of a desperation, to it, and a bit of whatever it takes. And thriving is just more of, you're prioritizing survival and not dying, and running away from bad is not the same thing as running toward good. If that makes toward what you like, running away from what you don't want isn't the same as running toward what you do want. And a lot of times we think we know what we want. And one of the things I learned in the vision quest was, like, I made a list of like all the things that I wanted. I was like, I want this, and I want this accomplishment. I want this much money in the bank account. And then Jim and Jade were like, what's the feeling that you think you'll get if you get that amount of the money in the bank account? And I was like, well, I'll get freedom. I'll get to choose work I love. I'll feel safe because I won't have to worry about, putting food on my family's table. I'll be able to, take care of my parents and honor the sacrifice, and it's like, that's what I actually want. I don't actually want the money. Like, if I got the money, but I didn't get a sense of freedom and safety and the ability to care, like, it would be for nothing. What I actually want is more of this. And so I think coaching is a way of supporting people in transition and change. And it's also about helping them get really clear on what they really, really want. Because there's nothing more disappointing than chasing something that you think is going to make you happy and you think is going to give you deep fulfillment and joy and meaning, and then getting it and realizing that it actually wasn't that. And that if you had known that, you would have sort of optimized for a different North Star all along the way. And so, for me, I was wrestling with some of that as well. So I got a coach. And sometimes we think that a coach is for somebody that's like getting sent to the principal's office, and it's like, man, even Tiger Woods, like or whoever, LeBron James, like everybody has a coach. It's just somebody who's more objective, who's not you. And for me, that reflecting thing is entrepreneurs. Sometimes it's hard to have someone to be able to talk to someone about certain topics and be really understood. Like we can talk about our spouse and they understand this emotionally, but they might not understand the business side sometimes. Or we can talk about our co-founder, but what if the problem is with our co-founder? Or you know what I'm saying? And so it's coaching provides a really safe place for you to be able to share with somebody who truly kind of understands the emotional, psychological realities of the journey, but also the business and pragmatic realities of what's going on. So I got a coach, and I should have gotten a coach like years earlier, but I was just like, I don't need a coach, and that's for people who are weak and need help and stuff. And I got into coaching for like help me grow revenue faster and help me be a better CEO. And what I got out of it was these deeper gifts and skills in life, like my blind spots and better self-awareness about where I'm pretty reactive and I don't have a lot of choice in how I react. I just react in one specific way. And that specific way served me a lot in my life, but now it's like backfiring. So that's a very confusing place to be when like your way of being has been very good to you and now your way of being stops working for you. And it's kind of like, what do I do? And it's disorienting, and there's an opportunity for reinvention, but change is hard. And so having some support, and the change can be anything from I'm going from a one person startup, I'm the maker, I'm doing everything, to now I have 5 people and I'm managing more than I'm making. And that's like a huge transition. Or I'm going from, this type of leadership to this type of leadership, or, whatever. I need to take on investment and find capital partners to help me fund the business, or I just sold my business and I need to do something else. And I don't want to do the same thing. And I have no idea what I'm going to do. And I had to put a lot of my identity in this old world. And that identity is eroding and shifting. And I have no idea what the next thing is. And that is terrifying and disorienting. And that's a beautiful life transition where, a coach kind of helps out. So sorry, that was all over the place, but those are some of the things that kind of came up for me as you were, asking.
Yeah. So then on different parallel, but probably not that different paths, we both we signed up for this vision class. And we ended up, so this is in Montana in October 2019. And what it is, it's like 9 days long. It was just founders and entrepreneurs. Santi, I don't think I ever verbalized this to you or anyone else, but when I went there, like not everyone was funded. Like you and Adam like had a funded startup, and a few others did. Thierry did, and I forget. Yeah, a few did. But I'm going up there as just like this. I'm bootstrapped, completely bootstrapped. Felt like I felt like I was going there and you guys all had grown up businesses. And I
felt the same with you. I'm like, I'm not profitable. You're profitable. So it's funny how you always,
right, I'm there with all these grown-ups. That was funny. So anyways, you're there for 9 days, and it's 9 days of like a retreat, really, led by these 2 amazing guides, that they were just incredible and really dig into the heart of the matter. Like that question they asked you is, what's the feeling you think that you want from this goal you're going after? And then part of this is they send you out into the wilderness for 4 days or 3 days. No food. Yeah, you're fasting for.
That's what I was the most terrified. If I remember, you were a little scared of the cold, and I was really scared of the no food. I was scared of the cold. It was like literally headlines in the Montana papers: the storm of the century. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, if you're in South Florida, and it's a storm of the century, it's like, okay, whatever. But we're in Montana and it's the storm.
Yeah. It's a
And
big deal.
we're going out there. I started a timer on my stopwatch when our fast started. And it was 96 hours without eating, alone in the wilderness. And of course, I've spent a lot of time in the wilderness, but it was you and the Adam hadn't spent that much time out in the woods. And but yeah, I think it was a pivotal moment for all of us. I know it was. I look at what's happened in all of our lives since that, and how we stayed in touch. So can you talk a little bit about, and then you had the cat. You had the cat become your friend while you were there. We were about grizzly bears, but you befriended this, or a cat befriended you.
Yeah.
That was, it was interesting. I've had cats come into my life since then. Both my kids had crazy rescue stories of these little tiny kittens, like 4-week-old kittens. My son found one on the side of the highway.
Wow.
Yeah, where he was driving 60 miles an hour. And I've never been around a cat in my life. And so I now know what it's like to have a cat adopt you, and how special that can be.
Yeah.
And
I didn't know that, Jeff. That's beautiful. Yeah, I didn't choose the cat. I think the cat's the choice, the one that has the choice in these situations a lot of the time. But no, I mean, I think for me, I think one fundamental belief that vision quest shifted for me, and this is a little meta and philosophical, but like I think I saw because of my I think because of some of the uncertainty and unsafety I experienced in my childhood, I saw the universe as kind of this like chaotic, not evil force, but just chaotic, and like everything's headed toward entropy kind of a thing. And any order and goodness is because we exert our will and our effort and we make it so. And so it's this very like, if I want something good in my life, I got to go out and get it myself, because it's not just going to like come. I can't just trust that good things will come to me. Like I got to go and grab them or take them from somebody, this Montana wilderness, like you said, was felt very, not hostile, but it was like just so indifferent to us being there, right? It was just a cold, barren place that felt like and for me, I this cat adopted me and decided to follow me to my tent, which was like a 45, or where I ended up putting my tent. It was like a 45-minute hike. And this cat, it just starts following me on the first day of the vision quest. And I'm like, you got to turn around. Like I've got no food. I'm headed into grizzly territory. It is cold. Like you have a warm barn. Like I was concerned about the cat, but the cat, has its own free will. And so followed me all the way to the tent and like sat on the top of a tree until I made my tent. And then as soon as I got in my tent and my sleeping bag, and I was just kind of like, oh, I'm here and I'm hungry and I'm cold. And like, I'm here for 3 days and I'm kind of a little scared about this cocoon I'm entering. This cat, who is a barn wild cat, on this dude ranch, crawls into my sleeping bag and just starts purring and kneading on my chest. And I don't know if you've ever had this happen to you, but you very clearly hear words, in your, not hear words externally, but like you inside of you, these very clear message. You get a message, and it was like, you are warm, you are safe, and you are loved. And it was like this cat was like telling me this, but it wasn't telling me. I just like knew it. I felt it deeply, and I felt safe, and I felt warm, and I felt loved. And I was like in the most vulnerable place maybe I had ever been, not only in my life stage, going through all this change and realizing all this conditioning, but like literally cold and hungry. And I was in the most like inhospitable place I'd ever been, but I felt the most safe and warm and loved I had ever felt, and deeply knew that. And so that was like really transforming, and was ever since then, I go out on different countries or cities, and street cats come up to me and, roll over and trust me and stuff. And it was, it's been it's almost like a spirit animal kind of situation. And I was like, not really a cat, person before then. My wife had reluctantly convinced me to get 2 cats. And like just shortly before that. So that, that was, one of the things for me. And then also realizing that it was time to go from surviving, from kind of feeling like I was clawing above water every day to like giving myself permission to actually feel safe. And I realized I wanted to play more. I like play was a big theme. And I realized you can't play if you don't feel safe. Like you're not gonna like go into flow into like a Lego set when you're like in the middle of a highway with cars. Like you're too concerned about your safety to let go and release into the flow of play of doing something just for the sheer enjoyment sake of the journey, not just for the outcome that you're getting. And so for me, it was like, how do I go from this suffering to run away from the things I don't want to go into play and pursuing the things that I do want? And what do I actually want when what I wanted was shown to be a bit of a mirage?
Hmm. And can you talk a little? So the Vision Quest it was amazing. It was incredible for me. I know I came into it sort of coming off of a bit of a health crisis, being in a state of flux, and getting incredible peace and clarity about the path I wanted to take going forward. Just being out in the woods alone, hungry, cold for those days, and then coming back and having the coaches and the guides to take you through the processing of that, and having that little tiny community we had.
Yeah.
So special. So special.
It was so special. And one of the things I remember about your journey was like you were really recommitting to doing this journey in a very Jeff way, like authentic to the revelations that you've had about the world and yourself and how things worked. Just like sharing that more authentically and more in a way that was for you to do it. Like it was like, how do I do it? Like I've done a lot and really proud of what I've done as Jeff, and now how do I do it in even more Jeff and authentic way? And how do I share these gifts and this knowledge and these insights with even more people? And I just left really excited for the difference that you've made in the world. And when you shared how much your platform has grown, it was not a surprise at all. And I can see the seeds of that, sprouting from that Vision Quest.
Thank you, Santi. Appreciate that. So can you talk a bit about then what changed for you coming out of the quest?
Yeah. I think one of the realizations for me was that to fully kind of achieve our mission, we couldn't do it alone. And we had this really great strategic partner at Amplify called 15Five. And they were doing performance management and one-on-one, all this functionality that our customers were asking us to build, their customers were asking them to build. I had developed a relationship with the CEO and the co-founder there and just felt really values aligned. And I realized that actually I had to for this thing to truly see its potential, I had to let go of me being the one in control. And I would have like, in the beginning, in the early days, I would have rather have had it go under than lose my involvement in it, if that makes sense. And I realized that for it to, fly and thrive, I had to release it. And ultimately that meant selling the company to 15Five. So that was, part of the transition. Another part of the transition for me was this idea of not just being about achieving my entrepreneurial dream, but helping other people achieve their entrepreneurial dream. And I had kind of, again, achieved mine kind of twice over in a way that was more big than I even dreamed about. And so then it became about, instead of achievement, it became about not even legacy, because there's a bit of sort of ego in legacy of like, I want to be remembered, but more about like giving back is a bit too high horsey, like I'm giving back. So somewhere in between of just impact, I guess, maybe from achievement to impact, or from achievement to meaning. Achievement to artistry would be a good reboot poem, term.
Maybe I think like service might be a word.
Yeah, from achievement to service. That's a really good one. And so I didn't have a new vision for the first time in my life. I didn't have a new vision of a new startup and a new venture to go and, machete through the jungle and find my path. And it was about, how do I help others achieve, their dream, and how can I be of support to them? And how can I be the person that I wish I had more of when I was going through? Like, the entrepreneurial journey is a hero's journey. It has high highs and low lows, and it looks like a rocket ship from the outside, but it feels like a roller coaster. Of just like, we're not going to make it, and we're conquering the world, and sometimes that happens in the same day. And so it is an intense journey. And so to have more help and more support is something that I wish I would have had earlier on, that would have avoided some of the unnecessary suffering for me along the way, and some sort of, mental health challenges that were building toward the end as I was just unaligned with that. And so yeah, it just that was a big transition for me. So selling the company, I took almost a year long sabbatical, which was from somebody who was working. I don't even want to put hours on it. It was just every moment I was awake, I was either working or taking the minimum break so that I could go back to working. Somebody going from that, moving 1,000 miles an hour, venture back, growing 100% plus revenue year over year, to choosing to do nothing, not do nothing, but to not work, was an incredible experience. And out of that experience of doing that, I realized that I wanted to be a coach, because I got into it, like I said, for the business benefits, and I got out tremendous human development out of it. And so I sort of really appreciate that opportunity to kind of on that Trojan horse, if you will, you come in for sort of business performance. And yes, you get that, but also there's this whole life too that we can have as entrepreneurs, and we can have success and growth and achievement, and also sort of, we don't have to necessarily choose between both, and we can have a full life as we're doing big things in our organizations. And that's what I'm really like passionate about, helping entrepreneurs. Most of them have success or have traction, and they're wondering, how do I get more of that, but how do I also have a life that I'm not going to regret when I'm 10 years from now, 20 years from now, where my kids graduate from high school and leave the nest.
It strikes me it's a bit of a full circle in our conversation to, like, when you go from surviving to thriving, when you have that whole life, that's what allows you to show up as a leader. Like, if we flip back to the beginning, how do you be a good leader as you become a better human? And that will, I think it's required to be a great leader. You got to be a great human. And how can you be a great human if you just always got your nose down and you don't have that whole life?
Yeah. It's hard to be mindful of the impact we're having on others when every day feels like survival. We're just trying to stay afloat. And so when you're trying to stay afloat, you accidentally are grabbing someone else and pulling them under, because you're just trying to survive. It's a different way of being and showing up in the world. We all have access to it.
So tell me about so I know you've got a very, very, very small coaching practice. You've just built this around, you're going to create this great life for yourself, and you're only going to work with like the great, clients that are a great fit and are looking for the outcome that you're looking to foster. Tell me about, like, not individuals, but who are your client? What are they like?
Yeah. Most of them are founder CEOs, right? So it's lonely at the top, and there's more and all the decisions that all the problems that can't be solved by your team roll up to you. So you have sort of the loneliest spot, and the toughest problems are the ones that reach you. And so that's I've been a CEO, and that's what I bring to the table, is this combination of having been a CEO and a founder, and also being a good coach and having that deeper level of empathy, of really knowing what it's like to be in the arena, to be in the trenches, in the everyday. And so it's typically founders and CEOs. They're going through they recognize that they are going through some sort of transition or change in their business or in their life. Many of them are just getting started on their business, and some have been doing this for 20, 30 years and are now looking at, they just sold it or they want to sell it. And they're looking at, how do I reinvent myself? Who am I? And what do I want to do? And what do I want to be when I grow up? And now I have choice, and now I have means, and now I have time, and now I have resources. What life do I really want to create myself? And this is the first time that they're kind of giving themselves permission to even ask that question. And so that's why I help my clients, support them through change. That means that we're talking ongoing every couple of weeks is when we're meeting, sometimes more than that. I work in virtual and Zoom. So it's really an honor to get to support them. And so it's fairly client driven in the sense that they're bringing to me their desired change. I'm helping them get clear on what they really want out of their life, and helping them actually get there to their life with the least amount of suffering, and in a way that's most aligned with who they really are, so they can
thrive at work and thrive in life. Yeah.
And so are they mostly funded or are they?
Yeah, some are venture backed. It's a very unique skill set on how to manage investors, and how to deal with all that. And so many of them, I have that experience. I've raised tens of millions of venture capital financing. Many of them are not, and they're bootstrap and they're profitable businesses and aren't externally funded. They're funded from customer funded or from their profits. And then others are just personally engaging with kind of whole life coaching, and then they're moving away kind of from work. Typically I share from wiggles of product market fit is when I kind of get involved. And then typically I'm not working with too many big Fortune 500 corporations and that kind of a thing. It's kind of from wiggles of product market fit. You've got a business, you've got maybe a few people that you're working with, to I now am a manager, to now I'm manager of managers, to now I'm recruiting my exec team, to now I'm raising funding, to now we got to make acquisitions or be sold, to now I sold it, and now what do I do? it's that conundrum. What it's not like career coaching for like how do I get the next promotion in a corporate environment. That's just I haven't been in that environment. I'm not super passionate about that work. It's also not the super early days of like I have an idea and no customers. What do I do? That's a bit too early for me as well.
So we've been talking for almost 2 hours. We killed the batteries in your earbuds. I noticed.
Emergency change.
So what, like, this crazy, I mean, a very full life you've already led. You're very young to have led such a full life. So I guess the last question would be, like, with all this experience and now with coaching, what are some of the big lessons for someone who is stuck in the weeds, who is just they may look successful, very successful on the outside, but they are really just in the survival mode. What's the biggest takeaway for them to get to thriving? And I know it's that there's no one size fits all. And I know there's work involved, and not just work on the business or work on yourself. But so there's no magic bullet, let's put it that way. But what's on your mind and in your heart right now for those folks?
Yeah, I think if I recall, the thing that really helped me in the disorienting times, which was right around the vision quest. I remember Jim and Jade talking about your longings kind of pull you through to where you need to go. So your longings, like what are your heart's deepest longings? Like in that moment where you're not stressed out, when you're not nervous system activated, but you are calm and a bit grounded. And if, just to get grounded, like breathing and mindfulness is like kind of the way to kind of get there. So if we're, triggered, that we can't do anything when we're, triggered and hyperactivated. And so mindfulness, meditation, breathing, being in nature, that can sort of pull us through. But in that moment, when we think about what do I really, really want for me, those longings provide kind of the thread to keep pulling on to get to the other side. And it feels like there's this, when we're in that moment, it feels like there's this heavy fog in front of us and we can only see one or two steps. And before we had the whole landscape clear, and all of a sudden we can't see a couple feet in front of us. It's getting clear on what are those longings, but really thinking them deeply, not just like what I said, like the money in the bank account, but like what's the feeling behind that, and how can I actually get some of that now? And to go through that process, we need to kind of look backwards a little bit and say, like, what conditions in my life led to me being here, and addressing some of those. For me, it was realizing that how much my lack of physical safety that I felt in my childhood was actually showing up in the way that I was leading, or some of the scarcity mindset I had around finances or something like that. And so it takes, I think the longings pull us through, and the longings show us the way in the fog, number one. And number two, radical inquiry is the term that Reboot sort of talks about, is of asking ourselves the deep questions of what conditions led to me, being here, and the hardest question, which is how am I complicit in creating the conditions that I say I no longer want, and realizing that we have some of the responsibility, not full responsibility. We have some, but most importantly, we have agency to be able to choose a different way. And choosing a different way when those neural grooves are deep in our brain and we're used to going a certain way, it takes a real courage and a real trust in uncertainty and a real willingness to fail, to choose to proceed in a different way. I think mastery of life is being able to have choice about how we respond to different situations, not just react in the way that we've always, reacted. That's what comes to mind for me.
That's awesome. Thank you, Santi.
Thank you.
How can people find you if they're, how can they follow up?
Sure. So I have a website. It's called withsanti.com. So WITHSANTI.com. So that's be the best place to find me online.
I loved catching up with you. This is great.
Same here, Jeff. It's great to see you.